You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Barcelona?
You mean Bars owned? Lona?
Bars owned Lona?
Bars owned Lona? Pep. He got some spring in his step, Pep. Especially to get the last night's game, right?
Yeah, this Pep has some spring in his step. That kind of rhymes. Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit later in detail in our third block, but their second block, pardon me. So certainly exciting days. If you're here, I'm not going to lie. I watched the game as low key as I possibly could have yesterday because I did not want to set myself up for failure. And it was, I was rewarded for it. Who knows that City has it in them, and I think a lot of people are going to suggest, and again, we'll talk about this in more detail in the Champions League, that maybe it's the start of a new era. It could just be a blip too. We don't know, but for the day,
It's just one game. Come on,
just for the day, and it was at home too. Let me have it, Barcelona. That's what I'm going with, Kevin. Welcome to Soccer Today. It's a bit later today than normal, but that's okay. Sometimes days we have to do it for scheduling a little bit. We have to move it around. This would normally be about what time it is when we have to do a scheduling bump for when we're occupied at noon. But it varies day to day. But how you doing on this? It's rainy here in Toronto. Anyway, is it a rainy up your way too?
it's 16 degrees Celsius, about 57 Fahrenheit. It's sunny, a little overcast, but I'll take it on November 2nd, Duane.
Yeah, I think it's coming. I think what you're getting is what I had yesterday, which was lovely. I took a photo. I was out for a walk, and it was like green foliage everywhere, and people's gardens were still flowing the day after Halloween. It's fine. We'll never have to pay this back.
No, exactly. And, Duane, the one thing that I have to say, it's unfortunate that global warming is a thing, but here in Canada, we're actually appreciating that global warming just a little bit.
Yeah, we'll talk to us in February when the lake's very warm too. And if you understand anything about it, here we're having a weather podcast right now. But if you understand anything about weather, and if a body of water that's large like Lake Ontario gets warm and it gets hit by cold air, that creates snow.
Means Buffalo is going to be buried once again.
So lake effect is something that's going to be the bane of our existence here in Toronto this winter, I fear. And it might be something that we need to worry about on December 10th, say. But there's still a little bit to go before that, Kevin.
Or November 20th, because if it snows on November 20th, it's the hypothetical first leg of the Eastern Conference Final at the Big O if Montreal Impact get the job done on Sunday. And let's just start there, Duane. Training today, Montreal Impact. A few things happened today, so one benefit of doing the show later on, a couple players were injured, and it's actually some people are worried, some people just think it's preventive.
Yeah, and look, you're always going to get the hyper focus on training and little limps and bruises. I'll let you know a little secret. Pretty much every player out there has some kind of nick or bruise at this point of the season, especially in the playoffs where they become quite intense, and kicking one another seems to be normal and accepted by the league. We'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, pretty much everyone's going to have some injuries there. Any other drama in Montreal land, or is everyone pretty excited? When are they flying out to New York? Because it's got to be soon, I would think.
I think it's Friday, if I'm not mistaken, would be the day. Friday, late Friday or early Saturday morning, I would say Friday. What I think it's interesting is big thing that people talk about, probably more in your neck of the wood than mine, is the MVP award and how, maybe the two, if not arguably two of the top five players were snubbed in this year's competition.
Yeah, look, Piatti's another name that doesn't get talked about as much, and that's because, look, and people will accuse me of Toronto bias here, but I'm hardly the only one about to say what I'm saying, and I'm hardly the only one out there saying this stuff. Giovinco not being in the final three is ludicrous. It's simply not justifiable or defendable on any objective or subjective level. It is quite literally, statistically speaking, the biggest snub in MLS history. It to me illustrates how little attention the rest of the league gives to others that aren't in their own backyard. That's been the biggest problem in this league forever, that people just don't have a knowledge of the whole league. And basically what they're doing is they're remembering that Giovinco was hurt for a month or so near the end of the season and going, oh, well, he was hurt, so I can't vote for him. If you look at his actual stats, he's the first person to ever be on a playoff team and have the most goals and assists combined in a single season and not be nominated for the MVP award. He's one of 3 people, period, that has not been nominated for an MVP award when they've had the best total combined goals and assists, and 2 of them played for Canadian teams. So anyone that wants to tell me that there isn't, it's not a bias, but just kind of an ignorance to things that aren't in their backyard, and especially not in their own country even, the evidence doesn't bear it out. And this is just pure stupidity that he's not on the roster. There's just no debating it. Like, I showed the Who Scored rankings the other day, and I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but he's like laps ahead of the field. Like, he's like Usain Bolt levels ahead of the field in terms of the advanced numbers when you look at them and put that sort of number on them. He's, as I said, using like a stat that everyone can understand, goals and assists. He's still miles ahead of the league. And to not have him on the list, come on. Like, what are you trying to be contrarian, MLS?
And to add to your point, I'm going to add Nacho Piatti to that conversation, because statistically speaking, Nacho Piatti did have a very good season, 17 goals, if I'm not mistaken, but the goals do not reflect the entire story of Nacho Piatti. It's the way he plays. It's the way he puts 3 defenders in his pocket in one single move. He is to the level of Giovinco. Those 2 players, yeah, it's a snub, yeah. Piatti was not necessarily expected to be in the top 3 because of the type of season Kleshton, BWP, and Villa had. You had a feeling those 3 would be in the conversation, but we figured there was going to be one of the New York duo, and Giovinco would be a 3rd. Nacho Piatti would have had like an honorable mention in 4th, but not like available for the choice. That's how I imagined it to be, with a Kleshton probably in 5th and having BWP in the nomination for it. Having both of them does feel a little bit where, yes, it's not MLSsoccer.com that comes with those awards. They just cover it, but MLS's quarter is in New York as well. I don't know if it's because that market is more focused on, or there's more camera, more lens towards it, so maybe people get more attention out of those teams. Maybe they remember those players. But the fact that none of Giovinco or Piatti are in that conversation actually dilutes it for me a little bit this year.
Yeah, look, I mean, first off, it's an award, so it ultimately doesn't really matter. An individual award in a team sport and all that sort of jazz. There's a marketing arm to it as well. This does nothing for the league's reputation of being New York centric. Although, to defend the MLS Soccer.com guys, they were one of the loudest voices against it. Everyone on Extra Time Radio essentially were out immediately going, this is ridiculous. The armchair analyst, Matt Doyle, he called it ludicrous. Andrew Wiebe said that he just was stunned by the fact that Giovinco wasn't on it. Benjamin Baer, the research guy, he wrote a column which he called it the biggest snub in MLS history. So the guys that write for the media arm of MLS are equally as appalled by this. But for those that don't know, the voting is divided into 3 between like owners and technical people is 1/3. The players themselves get a vote. So basically the captains vote, or they pass it around. And the players, everyone thinks, oh, that's great, the players pay attention. Do you think the players pay attention to anything other than their own backside? Not really. Players are kind of the worst people to evaluate talent in terms of what's around them, because they're so self-centered. They have to be by the virtue of being a professional athlete. You can't be paying attention to much outside your own backyard or much behind your own backside, like I said. And the media code is for 1/3 as well. So, obviously when you get into the administrative side of things, and MLS is never transparent about what the actual breakdown of the votes are, so we don't know how this played out. There's some manipulating here, and Giovinco had won it last year, and Toronto doesn't need a boost, and you have this Battle of New York thing that they really like to play up right now. I think that they'd be lying if you put Don Garber behind a lie detector and asked him who he wanted in the Eastern Final, and if he said any combination of Impact and/or Toronto, he'd be lying.
You know why? I feel there's a possibility Montreal Toronto gets it done. Because usually when a league, or we've seen like the NFL always dreamed of the city that hosts a Super Bowl to make it there and stuff like that. And it rarely happens. You can rarely predict it. And usually when you choose wrong. So if they wish they have that New York final in the East, guess what's going to happen? It'll be a Two Solitudes derby.
It'll be, yeah. And look, if again, in fairness to the engaged fan that is American that listens to this show, because I know that we have a lot of American listeners, and if you're listening to the show, you're choosing to expand yourself, right? Like you're choosing to listen to perspectives that aren't hyper league focused or hyper American focused, and that's probably a good thing. So congratulations and thank you, and we need more of you. Tell your friends. However, so what I'm saying is there are Americans out there that would appreciate the Two Solitudes 401 derby as an East Coast final, but the mainstream maybe not so much, and certainly I don't think it would be getting a lot of press in the papers. And I'm sure that ESPN would rather have one of the New York cities. Well, we still have the potential for an LA New York final, and obviously, I think the NYCFC v LA Galaxy final has people in head office kind of going, we can market that one. Yeah. But lots of work for at least two of those, at least the New York side of things, as we talked about the other day on that side. Kevin,
I have another rant in me today, Duane.
Okay,
and it has to do with the other kind of categories. With the so let's go through a few categories. I don't have a problem with Defender of the Year at all. So here's the nominee for Defender of the Year in MLS: Matt Hedges of FC Dallas, Axel Schoenberg of Colorado Rapids, and my second favorite Van Damme, Yeli from LA Galaxy. No problem at all. Where I have a problem.
So some people in Toronto do have an issue with Drew Moore, but it's a lot more debatable. That one's a lot more subjective.
Yes, there was an improvement with the amount of goals conceded by Toronto. Yes, it might be directly related with Drew Moore's performance, but with those three names, you can't really argue because it's one and the same. There could be like 10 defender in that.
I think it should be Soyberg, by the way. That he's the least known name on that list, and based on Colorado's record.
So Van Damme's going to win.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because he's from LA.
So where I have a problem is with the All-State Goalkeeper of the Year finalist. How can you be Goalkeeper of the Year when you haven't played even half of the year for your team? How can a player like Tim Howard, no offense to Tim Howard, and no ill will, no bad intentions going his way. There's goalkeepers in the league that should be nominated in there in front of him just because of the body of work they've accumulated. Was Tim Howard that important for half the season for Colorado? Not saying that it wasn't good, but Zach McMath did pretty well in the first 6 months, and they were first in the league when Tim Howard came with over 2 points per game average. So is Tim Howard's play really deserves to be in that category when you do have 17 of the goalkeepers that actually played a whole season, and probably of those 17, 2 or 3 would deserve a spot? And yeah, I'm going to mention Evan Bush. He made a lot of spectacular saves. You know what we say spectacular sometimes because, well, maybe you're not positioned the right way for Evan Bush. His height actually makes him do more spectacular save because he gets to get there. But, you know, that's it. I hope it's Andrew Blake, because if it's Tim Howard, then you just give an award for 4 months. Best goalkeeper in the last 4 months.
Yeah, well, here's the funny thing about that, too, is if you believe in advanced numbers, none of these 3 guys should have been nominated. Now, advanced numbers and keepers are kind of an odd fit sometimes because we haven't quite figured out how to factor in positioning and organization and things like that into a stat. So fair enough. That's the one area that the anti-stats folks do have an argument with. But even beyond that, if you look at just pure like goals against, Tim Howard actually had a worse record than Zach McMath had. So he's not even technically by numbers the best keeper on his own team, let alone in the entire league. But yet he's Tim Howard. When you have a guy like that on there, what this makes this look like is like a fan vote. You know what I mean? Yep. Like it's like the All-Star game where it's just like they're pushing their favorite players they recognize. It's like Major League Baseball where we've come to accept the idea that it doesn't really matter because it's just an All-Star game. We just want to see the players that we want to see out there. But this is supposedly to nominate your best players. Now, I think Blake will probably win this because I think the league has a vested interest in promoting him as their new up-and-comer, exciting kind of keeper. And he does make a lot of really spectacular saves that do stand out in people's minds. But certainly the inclusion of Howard there again speaks to what I said a minute ago of how little some people that have votes in this competition pay attention to the rest of the league. They're just recognizing a name.
It better be Robles or Blake, Duane. Otherwise, we're going to have another talk about it here.
All right, let's continue down these really quickly before we take a break. The newcomer of the year, we talked about that the other day, and this is one where I do think a half-season guy, just based on what he did, Ladero, that is, might deserve it. Although hello, Kamara. I mean, sorry, what? Oh,
Ola says bye-bye because, it's going to be Van Damme Olodero.
Okay, yeah, exactly. There you go. So the Rookie of the Year, it is exactly the three players that I think most people had on their list: Harrison, Morris, and Rosenberry. There's a great argument for Rosenberry. He doesn't stand a chance. It's going to be Morris.
It's going to be Jordan Morris. Even Harrison doesn't really stand a chance. Outside of his haircut making the rounds in everywhere now, because Harrison haircut is probably the most trendy haircut you can find right now. But Jordan Morris is going to take this hands out.
All right, Coach of the Year, the three guys that we've talked about. I think we've had the Coach of the Year conversation like 6 times in the show. So
and it was those are three guys that everybody talked about. I had that conversation last Sunday on the press box with a few different colleagues of ours, and Mastroianni, Pereira, and Vieira are the hands-down three that everybody would talked about, and almost everybody agrees that, it's got to go to Pereira. Yeah, Mastroianni's great what he was done for Colorado from almost last to second, great season. But the fact that Oscar Pereira goes from the academy to the top with the players graduating and playing and performing for FC Dallas, that's what I've been getting the actual American perspective, which counts for most amount of votes in that competition. Even though Vieira did a great job in NYCFC by not tanking, but struggling at the beginning, finding a way to turn around and being successful, in my opinion, Pereira is the probable winner.
Yeah, this is the one only thought on that, and I agree he'll probably win. But my only thought on that is the Coach of the Year is the one award that probably should consider the playoffs as well, because you have to set your team up to be successful in the playoffs in MLS, and ignoring that kind of is a big part of what their jobs are, right? But that's me past that. Comeback Player of the Year. I do have a bit of an issue with Frank Lampard being on the Comeback Player of the Year finalist list, because what's he coming back from? His own selfishness? I mean, he was hurt a bit, sure, but
his own 6 months more in Manchester. That's why he's coming back from.
I don't know.
The other two though, Molino and Pontius
will probably win it. He had a pretty serious injury, and he's a guy. He's one of those good guys that has been around MLS for a long time, and this is the kind of award they tend to give to good guys that have been around MLS for a long time.
Yes.
So I suspect Pontius will probably win that.
But Molino went from an ACL tear last year to tearing up in Orlando this year, so maybe Molino has a shot as well.
The MLS Works Humanitarian of the Year, like, I'm not going to pretend to know what these guys are. We're just happy they're on there and happy with what they're doing. That award's actually named tomorrow. Matt Lampson, Robles, and Zardes are the three nominees there. And maybe when that award is given tomorrow, I'll probably try and give a little bit of attention of what their actual charities are, because they deserve to have that out there. The Fair Play finalists, I don't know, Marshall, Rosenberry, and Terry.
Tierney, Chris Tierney.
Tierney, yeah, pardon me. Yeah, whatever. Let's move
on.
As
a team, though, you remember that it's, the rankings of the less yellow cards and all those points. Well, we have the three finalists of the Fair Play finalists in the team, and it's the Columbus Crew, Seattle Sounders, and Toronto FC with the least amount of yellows, fouls committed, cards received, and subjective evaluation or sportsmanlike behavior.
Okay, and the Referee of the Year, whatever. And I do have, I'm only going to say it, but the referee, they have an assistant referee of the year finalist as well. If you notice something about this, and I'm going to tell you a little secret. I have voted in these before. I did not vote this year. They've lowered the amount of people that have access to it. So thanks a lot, MLS. Thanks, Obama.
Cheers.
Anyway, the assistant referees, notice something about it? Look at their last name. Frank Anderson, Ian Anderson, Eric Boria.
AAB. Is it the top three of the list?
Top three alphabetical.
All right, so who's the assistant? Give me the list. All right,
yeah, exactly.
1, 2. You guys,
pretty much how I used to vote. Because how the hell do I know who assistant referees are? So yeah, the top three alphabetical are the three nominees, and I think that probably has something to do with how people voted for this award. And maybe Pro should give that award out on their own without having the inclusion of this. I don't know the referees should. I think you should honor the referees, but I think referees are honored by getting the assignment in the final, right? That's kind of how I vision. Like, I recognize that in the World Cup, the guy that gets the World Cup final, obviously they have to factor in what country they're from and all that. So it's not an exact science that way, but you recognize who the best referees are by the assignments they get. And I think most fans understand that and respect that too. In terms of giving them an award, it's kind of an uncomfortable fit, don't you think?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the awards announcement tomorrow, the Humanitarian of the Year, and then on November 4th, the Referee and Assistant of the Year and the Fair Play Award, individual and team. It starts to get interesting on November 10th with the Rookie of the Year, and then it goes one every day almost once every few a week until December 6th. The Landon Donovan MLS MVP player will be named at the MLS Cup final.
Yeah, well, that'll be fun when it's in Toronto and people boo him. We're getting cocky here in the center of the universe, Kevin. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We're going to talk a little Champions League. Speaking of cocky.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back. We're recording this at 5:22 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, if you're listening to this after the fact, which means that the games that are currently going on are pretty much all in the 80th minute or so. So we're not really going to focus on today's games simply because stuff can still happen. There's some interesting stuff, particularly going on between Warsaw and Real Madrid right now. But nonetheless, we'll leave that aside for today and instead focus on yesterday's games. Kevin.
Well, Leicester is 0-0 still with Copenhagen. Will be 10 minutes before we finish the show. We'll know if Leicester is still undefeated in Europe this season. Yesterday, Duane, Barcelona and Manchester City in Manchester City. The second match between those two in the group stage, and Barcelona is no more undefeated this season in the Champions League.
Yeah, and look, it was a game that mattered a lot more for Manchester City. That's not make any mistakes here, but what it did illustrate to me, it's interesting because the way City went about taking down Barcelona in that second half, and that's really what it came down to, is that they just massively outplayed Barcelona in the second half of that game, cranked their intensity up, and did tactically adjusted to the point that they were able to dominate the performance there. What they did is the exact same way that teams have taken City down in the past, and that's, keeping the intensity up, getting that high press, forcing them, because they want to play out of the back. You force them to make mistakes coming out of the back. You have to have the fitness and you have to have the players to do that. And City on the day were able to. As I said, it's interesting watching these two teams play because it's like mirrors playing each other. Only one of the mirrors is a lot older and a lot more reflective right now than the other one. So the new mirror got the job done for one half and was able to get through. Look, as a City supporter, I can recognize that it is a big night for the club. I recognize that because of the petness and all that sort of stuff, and because that they have been struggling to get the results that they wanted over the past month, although having watched all the games and in a way that most of you probably haven't, I would argue that they weren't struggling as much as the media was making it out to be. They just were getting a little unlucky, particularly in the Everton game where they dominated and missed two penalties. And, sometimes that'll happen. And I'm not saying that penalties and making them aren't important, but by and large, it's not really a recipe for success, Everton, is to give up two penalties and stop them. However, I'm still ranting on something that happened 2 weeks ago. I do that sometimes. What I'm saying
we're
is
still writing about something that happened 4 years and a half ago, 8-1. So it's fine.
Yeah, well, in terms of City, I could talk about stoppage time equalizers and all that sort of jazz from back in the day. But at any rate, look, I do argue that City has had other great Champions League moments already, that their Champions League performance has not been as horrific as some people make it out to be. They were in the semifinals last year, for God's sakes. But certainly it did seem different yesterday, Kevin. It seemed like that was an indication that regardless of how you feel about this club, regardless of how you feel about its money, and regardless of how you feel about whether they're ready or not, there's an indication by beating Barcelona by as comprehensively as they did in that second half that they do have a chance to compete against any of the top teams. Now, the contrarian will look at me and go, well, they lost 4-0 in Barcelona, which means that they lost that tie, 5-3, right? With Barca having an away goal. So Barca would have comfortably won a home and away tie. And that's a fair point. And I do think that Man City is still a year or so away from being truly a contender to win the Champions League. But I do think that they are going to be an awfully dangerous second seed in the next round for whoever they draw. And they pretty much guaranteed them second place yesterday because Gladbach gave up a very late goal to Celtic to tie 1-1. And that means that City really just needs to get a draw in that second leg, or otherwise they're going to go through if they get that draw. So that's probably there. If they get the win against Celtic, they're going to go through. If they get a draw in Germany, they'll absolutely go through. So it was a good day for Manchester City is what I'm saying, Kevin.
No, yeah, and the top of the group might be still tough to get, but you just need to be second. And that's all
you're still with a chance in the round of 16. And look, they're going to get a tough draw because, it looks like Leicester's going to win its group, which will eliminate one of the teams from competition for them to play. If Spurs win their group, then that's going to be another team out of the mix. So basically, you're probably looking at, Real Madrid or Dortmund or someone like that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say Atletico, Munich.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough draw. Like there might be one team in that mix because, for those that don't know, if you're new and you're afraid to ask, the way it works into the round of 16 is that you cannot be drawn against any team from your own country or any team that was in your group. So that will eliminate Barcelona, will eliminate maybe Arsenal, maybe Spurs, maybe Leicester from being in City's group, and that would leave the other 4 winners in that mix, depending on how it is. So really, there will be only 2 or 3 choices we'll know going into that, and probably one of them will be a bit of easier, and the other 2 will be world-class teams that we have heard about for years, historic teams, right? And it was always going to be that way since they got the draw, and that is part of what they did to change the seeding this year. In the past, the way that they drew up the Champions League in the past, City would have been in Pot A, which meant that they would have been the top seed in their group, and they would not have had a Barcelona in their group. Means that they would have likely been the number 1 seed had they performed up to expectations, and they would have drawn a much easier touch in that second round, but in that round of 16. But alas, that's not the case. Any other results jumping out at you from yesterday, Kevin?
No, that's the biggest one. The other one, nothing really jumps out at me, but interesting to see how it will unfold. There's another game. I think it's game 5 right now. Game 4. There's still 2 or 1 or 2 rounds.
Yeah. So there's 2 more games. There's 2 more games left.
It's game 4. It's finishing today. Yeah. Leicester is interesting to me. Now they're still 0-0. They're on the road, though. They're in Copenhagen tonight. There's 5 minutes left. It's, if Leicester, how they fare well in Europe this year and still struggling in the Premier League compared to last year, obviously. They're always going to be struggling compared to last year, but they do not have to win the league, Duane. They just have to make sure they don't get relegated, right? Because that's one thing you don't want is when you just won the Champions League, the Premier League, the year after you get relegated.
That has not happened in a very long time. It's the 70s was the last time that happened. So yeah,
Leeds I think is one of the we're a team that did that.
Well, they never won the Champions League, but yeah. Anyway, quickly, Kevin. That's as we say goodbye to this segment. Arsenal, PSG both advanced. The Arsenal wonder goal. I hate to bring it up because it was against the Canadian international. Gave the goal up to Ozil there. So that was a nice one. Everyone's talking about that one.
But that Arsenal goal, Duane, how many touches did Ozil do? How many, one defender, second defender. Oh, I'll call it around here. Oh, jeez. It was one of the nicest goals I've ever seen.
Yes, and unfortunate that there was a Canadian involved at the end, but what are you going to do? As I said, those results yesterday have ensured that PSG and Arsenal are now playing each other for top of the group. As I just pointed out, that is a vital thing. And, if PSG does win the group, that would be one that City could draw in the next round. Benfica and Napoli, 7.7 point. Besiktas at 6 points. Besiktas had the lead quite late against Napoli. It looked quite good in that game, but they couldn't hold on. A wonder goal to tie that one up.
Marek Hamšík with the now famous type of goal we've seen him score for years. Napoli from deep in the midfield, about 30 yards away, a left footer that went over the keeper, just went straight into the top corner. 0-0. 1-1, sorry.
Yeah, 1-1, yeah, exactly. And that makes, as I said, that group's everything to play for with 2 to play. And Group C, we talked about already. Barcelona 9, City 7, and Mönchengladbach at 4. So basically, City has Mönchengladbach and Celtic in their final 2, and Celtic is at home. So if they can get that, they just need 3 points of those last 2, and they'll go through as second place. To get the group, they're going to rely on one of those teams upsetting Barcelona. It doesn't seem likely, so we just move on from there.
And my bet of the day, remember yesterday, Duane? Well, I bet $5. I made 9. Atletico Madrid, Arsenal, and Bayern Munich, all winner. Those are my 3 guarantee yesterday, and guess what? They did. I didn't say you would win a lot, but at least you didn't lose.
I came close in my upset bet, if you look at it, because I had PSG was the one I missed, but I did have, I said City over Barcelona because they were at home, and I said Celtic and Mönchengladbach for the draw. So not too bad. If I'd done the double parlay, I would have. Atleti continues to roll 12 points. They're through. Bayern 9 points. They're through over 2 weaker touches in that we'll be playing for Europa League. As I said, we'll review tomorrow or today as it's going on. It's almost in the dying seconds now for most of these games, but we'll leave them well enough alone now and review those tomorrow and take a quick break, come back and have a little bit of Canadian talk, including the Canadian roster for friendlies against Korea, which aren't in the hex.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And we're back. Kevin, there was some, real quickly before we get into it, we're not going to talk about this right now, but there was some Canadian Premier League rumors that were put out today, news that Anthony Tatarra put out in terms of some possible involvement. If you're interested in that, check his Twitter feed out. It's @ForTatarra. We probably will consolidate our Canadian Premier League news into like a single show per week, like maybe a single block each week to talk about anything that's happened in that week, because I do think that things are going to start to come pretty fast and furious in the next little while. So we'll put that into a single dedicated block each week. For those of you that are desperate for that news, you can have that. You can focus on that one. It'll probably be on Wednesdays, but we'll talk about that off air. Let's move past that now, though. Canada named its roster today, and there's not a lot of big surprises to this, Kevin. They're playing Korea next month. A lot of younger players, players that are mostly, either in Europe or out of the MLS playoffs. You've got the Vancouver Whitecaps contingent out there. There's 4 Whitecaps that were called up for this. They obviously have nothing better to do right now. Kyle Lawrence also involved. He also has nothing better to do. Lamette, he's in there. Also, nothing better to do.
Nothing to do. Well, he just won the USL Cup.
Yeah, Tissot and Dixon. Also,
Tissot has nothing else. Tissot's looking for a club, actually, because after finishing the season with the Ottawa Fury in the NASL, he's looking for a possible suitor in Major League Soccer for making a comeback at the highest level next year for Maxime Tissot. But till then, Canadian national team player.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking at this roster. A couple things. Nothing really jumps out. I'm glad to see Kyle Lawrence continue to run it and showing his dedication to the program. I don't think anyone can question his loyalty. Guys like Hulett, a lot of times there was a lot of questions for many years about Junior Hulett and his willingness to play for Canada. The fact that he's still showing up to play in a friendly in Korea in the middle of his season speaks volumes to his dedication. Arfield's not there this time. I think that's a guy that's getting regular time in the Premier League. Leave him to hell where he belongs.
Leave him alone. Just call him when it actually matters.
Yeah, and obviously the TFC guys not being involved. If you are the most literal thinking Canadian national team fan out there, you might be angry about that, but give your head a shake.
Why did Rosario not get picked? Where's Rosario? Is there a beef between Finley and Rosario? Is that why he's not called?
Yeah, or the fact that they're in a playoff run.
Hashtag hot take.
Same with the impact that are involved in this. Yeah, obviously you need to prioritize this. This is the one question. I was having a conversation with someone off air, and I'm not going to say who it was today, but someone that we'd know, simply about the logic of even playing this game. I guess not playing a game, but playing this game in this particular window, Kevin. Why are you flying to Asia to play a single game against a team that is much better than you? Especially when you combine that with the fact that the under-20s announced today that they are going to have a 2-game series in Honduras, which everyone loves. Everyone's a great idea. Yes, play in Honduras. Get down there, do it as much as you can. Play Guatemala, play in El Salvador. Do that. It's cheaper. Those teams, I think Guatemala was looking for an opponent. El Salvador was looking for an opponent until recently. Why not get down to Central America rather than spending the amount? I don't even want to know how much it's going to cost the CSA to have a camp in Korea for a week in the middle of November, flying all those guys around the world. It seems like there might have been a better option here, and I like the idea of playing a few more Caribbean and Central American fixtures in them until we're ready to start building towards a major tournament. Again, we do have the Gold Cup in the summer, and you can decide whether that's major or not. But right now, play an under-23 team and play it down in El Salvador or something. That would have been much better, Kevin.
And a lot easier on everybody.
Yeah, it would have been easy on the the finances of it as well. I don't know if there's much more to say about this right now. Obviously, the only other point that I'd make is the fact that it drives me nuts each year that the MLS playoffs take a 2-week break in the middle of the playoffs.
November 13th, that weekend. It's always weird to have like, all right, we're getting to the, oh no, the Eastern Conference Final in 2 weeks. Oh wait, oh yeah. Okay, so what do we do next weekend? Good. All right, fine. At least it's good for the players.
Like and we saw it last year with the NASL as well, who they'll be playing their postseason during this, where Julian Guzman had to miss the soccer ball, and he's such a key player to the Fury last year, and it was just a shame that he, what could have been a great way for him to end his career, basically. I think Julian hasn't officially announced his retirement, but I suspect he might be now. At any rate, that's something to keep an eye on for. But regardless, he wasn't able to because he was playing for Canada in what was a qualifying game at that point, and it's just unfortunate that these leagues put themselves in this position, but I just don't know what the answer is other than to bump the playoffs up or to speed the playoffs along or something like that. In the past, MLS did actually play games during the break, and that was wrong. And a lot of people scream bloody murder rightfully about that, and they thankfully don't do that anymore. But it still is a buzzkill, especially if you're not involved. And this is the hardest thing to do. If your team is out, generally speaking, and I have a lot of experience as someone in Toronto, I have a lot of experience understanding what it's like to absorb the MLS playoffs when my team's not involved. Tons of it.
You don't. You just move on with your life.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did because I'm me, but the vast majority of people around me, even people that love MLS, especially when it gets that late, they might watch the knockout round, they might watch the round that we're currently in, but once it gets deeper into that conference final, when there's only a few games and they're spread apart and they're not necessarily getting promoted on media, on mainstream media that you're absorbing all the time, hockey's starting to roll up here in Canada, football is getting into the middle of the season if you're a football fan, you get lost. And it's understandable how even the biggest soccer fan, especially the European teams league is rolling, and the Champions League's going on too. So your soccer interests are being spread. I don't know what the answer is. I've talked about the idea of having a sprint playoffs. You have it over 3 weeks or something like that, where you go bang, 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 single elimination or whatever you need to do to make it bang, bang. And that might not be quote unquote fair, but I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, Kevin. I don't know. That's not really a hot take to say I don't know, but I don't.
Yes, no, exactly. For the MLS playoff, we talked about earlier today in the Montreal Impact practice today. Oyongo and Mancosu stopped practicing during the practice, both probably with preventive measures. Bernardello calf injury still is a little not incapacitated, but it's a worry. He was getting treatment. He was on with the first training. So you had Oyongo and Mancosu probably in a preventive situation, but both stopped training today.
All right, fair enough. The Champions League results are all wrapped up. Spurs was a late. Spurs went Spursy honest, allowed one late to Leverkusen. They're down 1-0. Crazy game. Warsaw Madrid 3-3. We'll talk about all that and more tomorrow. But until that time, Kevin, as always, I'll let you do the honors and say goodbye.
11 a.m. tomorrow for Soccer Today. And until then, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.